Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Esther Mokwariola. At a time where some of the world's biggest problems largely boils down to lack of equity and equality, it remains difficult to thrive and survive as a woman than anything else. From contending with social bias and patriarchal perceptions to bearing the brunt of a failed system with a broken smile, women in Africa continue to contribute to social, economic and political developments against all odds. And so we ask, what are your thoughts on the plight and potentials for women in Africa and around the world as we reflect on this year's International Women's Day? You can join the conversation and share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC News NG. We'll take a report now, and Africa Today will be right back. Welcome on board.
Leave our daughters alone.
Nigerian women in recent times are changing the societal definition of mainly being someone's daughter, wife, mother, or widow by being more creative, enterprising, and dominant in the economic and political sector. This has gone some way in enhancing the growth of the nation, and this is what is being celebrated this year on the International Women's Day. Women from all walks of life came together at the National Center for Women Development, Abuja, to recognize the contribution of women and how to end child marriage in order to end the cycle of poverty and the repression of women.
In Africa, but also in Nigeria, over 60% of them are involved in the agricultural sector. So we're talking about women living in rural areas being the backbone of our economies. So it is right for us to celebrate them.
But it was also a time of sober reflection, considering the fact that women are increasingly on the receiving end in the presently prosecuted war against insurgency, with the recent adoption of the Dapchi girls a case in point. Wife of the President, Aisha Buhari, who called for the unconditional release of the adopted Dapchi girls, commended the efforts of security agencies in trying to ensure the safe return of the girls.
This year's celebration comes with a difference. In whichever way, it has to reflect the sad incidences of the abduction of our daughters, especially the recent one in Dapchi, Yobe State. It is a disturbing issue for which we must put our heads together, pray, speak out, show and share concern, and send goodwill to ensure that the situation will soon come to an end.
The wife of the Vice President, in her contributions, urged women to speak up and be bold no matter the circumstances.
It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. All over we see Nigerian women achieving one thing or the other and representing us well. On the other hand, we see our girls taken away from home, from school. We see parents crying. We see children toiling, laboring, suffering. We see our girls that are supposed to be beautiful and well taken care of. We see them suffering.
Highlight of the ceremony was a public presentation of the resolution of Nigeria Women Agenda for the reconstructuring of Nigeria by the First Lady.
Welcome back. Every year, March the 8th is marked as International Women's Day to celebrate the accomplishments and highlight the struggle for equality that millions of women around the world face every day. And according to the United Nations, about 1 in 7 adolescent girls end up as a child bride, and 1 out of every 3 women will be the targets of sexual or physical violence in their lifetime. Joining me in the studio, I have Tabia Princewell, journalist and a public policy analyst. And on Skype, I have Buki Shunibare, founder, Girl Child Africa. Good to have you ladies on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, let me begin with you now, Tabia. Let's look at the role of women in our society today. Now we're celebrating International Women's Day. What does it mean to you as a woman?
Well, International Women's Day is obviously a day to celebrate women. But what's ironic is that, you know, immediately after, we all seem to go back to sleep and live our lives like any other day. You know, so it just makes you wonder the significance of a lot of these days where, you know, people put their best foot forward on that specific day and then after that are just okay with returning to the basics. Yes, the usual way.
So why is that?
In Nigeria?
Why that return to, you
well,
know,
because, you know, I think that women in particular, you know, first of all, we are a very celebratory culture in Nigeria. We like all these days and celebrations, and everybody changes their display picture on social media and hashtags and all that. But what does it really mean to a lot of us? Not much, unfortunately. You know, the same people, a lot of people campaigning, go and ask them, you know, about sexual harassment in their offices, and you'd be shocked to find how many people are either victims or perpetrators of harassment, because our society is yet to fully, you know, embrace what it means to be a critical thinker. So that is to go beyond just tweeting hashtags, I'm wearing a pin that says I support women or whatever, to actually being a living testimony to what it is that you're campaigning for.
So what would you say is responsible for that kind of perception that you just mentioned?
Well, I think, you know, first of all, it's all over the world. People are very comfortable, you know, joining a trend. It's true that right now gender is a trendy topic around the world. You know, it's something that everyone wants to talk about. It's like youth empowerment. Yeah. Everyone wants to claim that they're empowering young people or empowering women. But the reality is still that, you know, a lot of things are still just
the way it
at the surface, not really going deep into people's consciousness. And I think it has much to do with education. You know, because one finds that in classrooms, you know, all around, not just Nigeria, all around Africa, all around the world really, the same stereotypes are still being enforced. So people grow up with the impression that the way things are is actually just the norm, and that change, you know, even the idea that change must be incremental, that you can't have drastic change. Change is always step by step. Yes, it is, of course, but people are not even taught anymore that it is possible actually to stand for something and to make that change.
All right, now Buki, let's look at gender equality, which is, you know, the focus of this International Women's Day celebration. Do you think, or rather, let me begin with this, how realistic is it that we can get that gender equality that we so desire?
You know, a report that was recently released by the UN says that the gender parity gap is so wide that before we can indeed boast of closing that gap and achieving gender equality, we would be going 200 years away from now. That tells you how far we have come, even though at a very slow pace, but how far we still need to go. Now, is that realistic? Yes, for me, it's realistic because we've seen progress towards that height where we can have that parity between women and men. So I believe it is achievable. There are examples that abound of how what was not obtainable before has now become obtainable in terms of closing that gap. Sadly, it is slow.
Okay.
You know,
Go
but
ahead.
then I think that it is possible for us to achieve that closeness. We may not be able to achieve the same, but at least we can get to that point where the gap is not as wide as it is right now.
And talking about still on the same matter, you know, the men, you know, give it to them, they believe that they own the world or they own the society as it is being perceived. But the woman, to them, they know that we are strong. So if, to some of them, they believe giving a woman all that power or all that opportunity, it will more or less, you know, take away the control that they have. This gender equality, do you think we can definitely achieve that purpose? Because even though you say we're not there yet, well, we'll definitely get there. How many of the men in our world today are ready to give that opportunity to women to be on their own, to stand on their own and say, yes, we can do this on our own?
A video emerged today on social media of Honorable Kazaure, who represents the Kazaure people of, I think, Jigawa State. And even though laughingly, people thought it was a joke, but I think it was quite sad and disappointing that we have lawmakers that could still think in that regard. And his perspective is quite funny, and in relation to the question that you have asked. And his perspective is, our women take care of us at home. They control us at home. Now, by the time we give them more opportunities, like we allow them to take over our space in leadership, political space, and all of that, that opportunity will mean them flooding this space, and men would not have a place to play. Now, when you have, people, just like you said earlier, we still live in a patriarchal society. When we have men still think in that way, and it's just one person speaking the minds of many men, and that's the reality we still deal with. It's still one of the reasons, for instance, why the Gender and Equal Opportunity Bill has not yet been passed. We're still grappling with a lot of issues, because people believe, for instance, that women should not have access to inheritance of land, wife inheritance should go on, and so many other issues. So while we may be grappling with these issues, and we may be grappling with men who think that women emancipation means flooding them out, I believe it is possible. It may not be in my lifetime, but the important thing is people like us will set that pace, and our children will continue until we get to that place where we can lead both that there is gender equality, if possible.
All right, let me hold your thought now. We need to go on a short break. You're watching Africa Today, and we have been looking at the plight and potentials for women in Africa and around the world. Welcome back. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is tagged Press for Progress. But that's not the only message that activists and advocates want to send out. It is also a call for groundbreaking action and purposeful collaborations for women to take control of their lives, advance in their fields of endeavor, and unleash limitless potentials. Now, Tabia, from what Buki Shonibara just said, it still points out, it still, gives the fact that a large percentage of men in our society, in Nigeria, don't believe a woman should have all that power, as it were, to be at the forefront, out of fear or out of any concern that they may have. Now, definitely, it clearly means that we have a long way to go. But if we're to talk about the role of women today in our society, would you say that the women themselves are ready to give themselves, that chance to stand for what they believe in and, take the bull by the horn and damn the consequences? Okay,
so let me ask you this. So during the last elections, there were female candidates. How many of us voted for women? How many of us supported women? I think it starts from there, because you find that, so there are two things. The first thing is, in Nigeria, unlike in countries like Rwanda, for instance, when a woman comes out, the society, in fact, women will come together, will organize, will campaign, will raise funds for that woman. How many of us can say that as women, we are motivated or participating in any kind of collective action that supports, the best amongst us to rise, be it in leadership positions, in business, or in politics? That's the first thing. The second thing is, now, when some women do make it into elective office in particular, what is their record? How many of us go out and say, you as a woman are meant to have my, you know, my best interest. You as a woman are meant to be pushing policies that will impact me and impact my sisters, my daughters, etc. How many of us do that? You know, we're in a society where, like I said, it's very trendy to talk about women empowerment. But how many of us, A, when given the chance, do the right thing for our society, for our communities, and B, how many of us even bother to support the few who decide that they want to take the plunge and try and basically get involved? Unfortunately, not many. You know, we've really imbibed and absorbed this mindset that, you know, women can't, or women shouldn't, or that women are somehow less capable or whatever, you know. And it's interesting to me because you see how like I said, in other societies, when a woman, there's so much excitement. The second a woman says, "I am running," you know, there's so much joy, so much celebration. But in Nigeria, unfortunately, you don't see that. So it's up to women. It's up to us. Nobody is going to do this for us. You know, it's up to women.
Okay, now, Buki, let's still look at this matter of gender equality. You know, you even though you rightly believe that, you know, there is a chance that we can get to that point, where do we draw the line between gender equality and disrespect? Because in some situations, some would say, if you give a woman the power, you know, to see that she is equal to a man, if, for instance, a woman, a wife and a husband, she will be tended to disrespect her husband. What do you have to say about that?
I think some people who interpret gender equality through those lenses are simply, in my view, just trying to find a reason why gender equality should not be achieved. When we say gender equality, we are simply saying one thing: open up the space for both men and women to play on an even playing ground, such that some positions, for instance, are not reserved for men, while some are reserved for women, such that the rules that apply to men is different from the rules that apply to women, and so many others. So we are saying that the sky is limitless. Open that space and let's all, you know, play together. No limitation, no payment of a certain amount of money to men and then women get a certain amount of money. By the time we begin to think of gender equality through those lenses, by the time we begin to think, for instance, that the rate at which boys go to school should be the rate at which girls go to school, we also think through those lenses that the kind of widow practices, for instance, or harmful practices that are meted at women is not the same that the men are going through, and such that we are able to clear off all of those things that affect women, which we know don't affect. That's what we are talking about. We are not saying that women want to take the place of men. We are not saying that. We're saying that just let us have the same field to play without you having to use one rule for women and one rule. And that is the lenses through which we must see and see gender equality. Until then, we would have men who think that gender equality means we want to, you know, push out men and so that women can be in that space. It does not also impact on respect. Gender equality here means that when we play on the same ground, when there is need for respect, there will be respect. Women have been able to show that example of, even when you have more money, there are a lot of women who are still able to respect their spouses or their bosses, despite the fact that they have more money than them. So it is not from the lenses of respect, in my view. It is from the lenses of opening up that space for everyone to play evenly. All
right, let's look at the issues that also affect women in this case. We have issues of domestic violence. We have child bride. We also have some women being denied education and all of that. Now, what can we do to, you know, change this narrative, to change this perception where a woman is left to, you know, endure some of these challenging trials and perceptions, as it were? What can we do, or what can government do now to help women in this regard?
I think that when we look at what the government has done, for instance, through the legislative arm of the government, We've seen the passage of the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Bill in 2015, even though currently it's only applicable in Abuja and one other state, I think. It's not spread across. When we look at such laws, we also have the National Gender Policy and such other even local laws that aid, women emancipation. So government can, not just come up with those laws, but also then ensure that the executive arm and the judicial arm also play their role in the implementation and the enforcement of those laws. One, the culture of silence is quite wide. It's quite entrenched in our society. And it's not just about girls and women, even boys and men. Boys and men are also being abused. They face domestic violence and all of that. But then as we shine the light on women issues, we also do the same. So there has to be that breaking of that culture of silence. We also need the passage of that Gender and Equal Opportunity Bill. It is another thing that the government can do. We have not done so much in that regard, and they address specific issues that the VAP Act did not address. One other thing is that there must be prosecution. We've not seen enough sufficient prosecution of offenders of gender-based violence, such that can serve as an example and can push people, deter people from those crimes. So if government can ensure that we pay more attention to those things, then we can begin to see movement towards gender parity.
All right, thank you very much, Buki Shunibare of Girl Child Africa, for your contributions on Africa Today. We appreciate it. Now, let's wrap up the show with you now, Tabia. From what she's just said, definitely there is a chance for women to have that equal parity as so desired. But equal representation is still something that women today are asking for. Would you say that our country or Africa have given enough, even though we've had the first female president in Liberia? Have we really seen enough of women in representation in politics?
No, of course not. Very, very, very far from it. But like I was saying earlier, have we asked for it? Or not even asked, have we gone out to take it? Because nothing in life is given. If you look at the progress, if you look at anything good that's ever happened in any society, you have power groups, people who benefit from a situation. If they benefit, why would you imagine they would just suddenly allow, another group to come in and, in essence, how they perceive it is take over? So you don't wait for the opportunity. When it presents itself, you go for it, to grab it. But unfortunately, a lot of women, are hesitant and don't. But the real thing is that change in any society, whether it's about getting more representation for women in elective office or whatever cause, happens because the society is clamoring for it. Legislators are not going to make laws that they don't feel people are asking for. By asking, I don't just mean talking about it on social media. And people are mobilizing to say, this is what we want, give it to us now, or you will not win the next election. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, we are poor on social mobilization. We are very good at talking about, lots of these issues.
And how can we get our acts together so that we can,
so we can move forward? It starts with, it starts with all of us, in our offices, in our homes. What are the things that we do to girls? What are the things that we say to girls, that either tell them you can't or that tell them you can, that is be, what you want to be? A lot of women, unfortunately, limit their daughters by telling them, for instance, that, don't get that MBA because a man will think you are too, you want too much, or you're too much for someone to handle. But the question really is, why would you, as a mother, want an insecure sort of person for your daughter, for your child, And I think a lot of it, again, is to do with insecurity. That's why I keep going back to education. We need to raise boys and girls to be confident in themselves. Whatever your strength is, whatever your talent is, your passion is, go for it. Live your life to the best and fullest of your ability, whoever you are, whatever it is that you want to do with your life. Nigeria still limits people, both men and women, which is why men feel, okay, there's so few opportunities already. Let me just hold on to what I have, rather than, allow more people in. So that goes for both men and women, actually. But the truth is that when you have more people in the public space, more people engaging and acting and producing whatever it is, be it in politics, business, or whatever, you find that because that space becomes so rich, everybody is enriched by it. And yes, it is true that if there's so much competition, some people will drop out, it's true, because maybe they're not good enough. But then guess what? Don't we as a society deserve to only have the best serving us, or to only have the best products being sold to us?
But let's not forget the culture too of our country. You know, where the culture says a woman is left to be in the kitchen, she's supposed to cook and clean. How do you also change the culture,
well,
the culture
again,
perception?
I think it's by education, because interestingly, you know, a lot of people don't know this. A lot of people will actually probably disagree with this, but if they research it, they'll find that it's true. African culture actually does support and promote equality, in the sense that in the African tradition, men and women are meant to form partnerships. Because in all mythologies, actually, before, you know, colonization, in all African mythologies, you always find that there's a male element and a female element, and both are meant to work in synergy. Unfortunately, with colonization, the female element, because that's how it was in the West at the time, was told to take a step back, and laws were passed that limited women. And of course, as would happen naturally, who benefits from such a situation? Men. So a lot of people were very okay with that happening, and a lot of us women, you know, as well, unfortunately.
So in other words, we have a hope that the woman can take the front runner in the runner of days or some time to come.
Yes.
Maybe my generation it will happen.
Definitely, it will happen. It will happen if you vote for women when they come out to say, you know, I'm running for office.
Support. Thank you very much, Tabia Principal, as well.
I'd like to
thank you, Bukky Shonibare, for your contributions on Africa Today. Thank you. In a world where girls are taught to shrink themselves and ladies are forced to limit their ambitions, the key to national prosperity and sustainable development lies in the way women are treated in Africa. No doubt, fixing the pieces of the puzzle and pressing for progress will include challenging cultural bias and taking consistent actions to create an enabling environment where every woman can thrive. And that is our package for today, but don't forget to join the conversation as usual on Twitter at TVC News NG, and follow me for updates around Africa at Esther TVC News. Until the next one, I am Esther Omokwariola, and always remember, this is Africa. Bye for now.